The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and positions of the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures, Baylor University Libraries, or Baylor University.
Welcome to Episode 8 of In Other Worlds, a podcast presented by the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. In this series, we plan to introduce you to research conducted by our faculty, some of our programs, and to highlight student experiences. Our guests today are Dr. Eleonora Boscolo, who is a lecturer in Italian within the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures, and Dr. Joseph Meyers, who is Manager of Creative Media for Baylor Libraries. Thank you both for agreeing to appear as guests on In Other Worlds. Dr. Boscolo began using podcasting as a teaching tool in her 3000 level course on Italian pop culture. She coordinated this effort with Dr. Meyers, and the two of them were going to describe for us how this came about, and as well as the pedagogical goals and benefits that podcasting can bring to the language classroom. So without further ado, we will go right into our questions, right? So Dr. Boscolo, let me ask, what inspired you? Where did you get the idea to use podcasting as a tool in your Italian pop culture class?
Yes, so I've been always interested in integrating technology in my language classes, and I've done different projects or activities with my students over the years. And I was really interested in this course because the topic of pop culture was really interesting to me. And as I was even preparing for what to include in the syllabus, I was considering a lot of podcasts that I personally watch because one, podcasts are an item of pop culture. They're as popular in Italy as they are in the United States. And also, it was just something that I was really interested in, and I thought maybe my students would also be interested in listening originally to podcasts in Italian. A few months before I started working on this course, actually, I was in contact with an ex-student of mine who at the time was doing a master's degree and in Italy at the university that I attended, actually in Venice. And he was telling me, he was a great student, he was an A student, but he was telling me that when he started his master's degree in Italy, he was still having a hard time, understanding people and being able to speak to them, which is obviously very common, very normal for the passage from learning a language in the classroom and actually, being with native speakers in the country where the language is spoken. But it just made me, at that time, as I was preparing for the syllabus, it just made me reflect on, especially even with all the activities that we do in the classroom that evolve all the four skills with the languages, especially when it comes to grading, we rely a lot on writing or like reading and comprehension. And so I was like, well, I'm already thinking about podcasts, right? And how to introduce it in my curriculum and in my syllabus as a tool for them to listen to. But what if I can also use them, to focus on speaking? So that was my goal for that class was, yes, we're going to talk about Italian pop culture, but we're going to put our focus, change gears a little bit, focusing on speaking and listening.
Cool. So I'm sure that in preparation for doing the podcasting with your students that you did some type of research about the uses or benefits of podcasting. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What you learned in that process?
Absolutely. I wanted to see what was out there, what had been done, and what the results were of that. And I found mainly two ways that podcasts were integrated in syllabi. One was using them as an implemental tool, right? So what was I was thinking about originally, which was including them in the classroom as a listening activity, right? Instead of giving them an article to read and then we discuss, how about you listen to the podcast and then we discuss this topic. And also I found other classes where they use them, they call them, instead of podcast, they're going to podcasting because it involved actually recording something, right? Yeah, and they were very different. Sometimes they were, just recording a presentation or a lecture. So there were different ways in which podcasting was included in the classroom. But what I found in all of them was that it increased, obviously, the ability for students to speak and understand the foreign language increase their vocabulary. And what I found very interesting, increase their confidence in speaking, which I feel like a lot of students don't speak in class because they lack that confidence.
Yes, it's a big hurdle. Yes. Dr. Meyer, answer a question. What has been your experience in working with faculty members and using podcasting in their classroom?
Yeah. Well, what's been exciting about sort of like this process and working with Dr. Boscolo is that I had just created what is on the table here, our podcast kit, as like a prototype. And she came to me in October of 22 with everything she just laid out in her conversation with me about like, what can the library do, right? And when it comes to faculty, what's always really exciting about something like a creative project with podcasting is when they come knowing about the medium and the form before actually assigning it, right? So one of the things that's been exciting about the faculty that I have worked with in sort of podcasting or audio medium in general is that they actually know what they're talking about. They have something they can point to that I can listen to. Maybe not specifically an Italian podcast, but like we were able to find like different types of podcasting and ways to approach it to get at not only the medium, but also her learning outcomes, right? What are the goals of the class? And so that has been exciting. And with this particular assignment, it was almost easy because it's pop culture. There's so many different ways to get at it. Podcasting in general is very pop culture heavy or interview heavy. But even in working with faculty across campus, I've had like historians who want to do like small micro blogging sort of podcasting. So we get into ideas of like memoir or like storytelling, right? So there's a bunch of different ways to get into it, even beyond this project. But what's really cool, especially from like a language acquisition standpoint and practice, nothing could be more perfect than a podcast for like learning how to listen and learning how to speak, because we're not even taking visual cues, right? Like you're not able to sort of like, okay, what is the emotion, or you just have to listen to language. So,
hey, great. So, and Dr. Boscolo, I understand that you didn't just like dump the podcasting idea on your students. You actually prepared them a little bit with some surveys. So can you tell us about what the result of your survey was?
Yeah. So at first, when I mentioned, when I said we're gonna make a podcast in this classroom, they were very scared, right? They never done expect that. But then I explained to them, I also never done this before. We're gonna do this together, and we're gonna listen to a lot of podcasts. And so it's like, do you listen to podcasts right now? Right? What are you listening? And if not, what are you interested in listening? I also was interested in general, what their listening habits are outside the classroom. Do they listen to Italian music, or they watch Italian shows? And so I surveyed them on these topics, a little bit to get them curious about podcasting and podcasts that I would later propose to them, and a little bit like to get their interest so that I could propose something within the topic of the pop culture, and also the podcast that I would offer to them to listen to in the topics that they were interested in. And I also surveyed them about their skills. So at the beginning of the class, I said, what do you feel like your speaking skills are from 1 to 5, and your listening comprehension skills. And then we surveyed them towards the end of the semester to see if they felt, because I felt that they improved. So I wanted to know if they felt that they improved, and they did.
So tell us a little bit how you structured the use of the podcast, or, how did this happen in real time in class?
So my syllabus was already structured in decades. So they did post-war Italy until nowadays, and so we went by decades, and we were going to cover pop culture in those decades. And so that kind of lent itself perfectly for podcast episodes, right? Mm-hmm. So I told them we're going to make we did 4 full episodes, and we spend usually 2 weeks talking about pop culture and different things within that topic. And then we dedicated a full week to each episode. They had to, first of all, it's not like they didn't write anything. They didn't practice writing. So they did some research and started writing a first script as a part of the homework. And then in class the whole week, we went over their script. I offered feedback. We practiced pronunciation and, enough to make it more fluent, right? Conversational also. And then we recorded in the class. And it was always that Friday of that week that we dedicated to the episode.
So you had different groups of students working together in pairs
Yes, yeah.
on separate topics or
Yes.
on the same topic?
Yeah. So the topic, the general topic of the episode was the decade that we were covering, and so I told them you can either go research a topic that we didn't really do in depth in class, maybe we touched on briefly, or I also gave them a list of things. Hey, I could not include these things in the classroom because we only have so much time, so you can also sell dates.
Sure.
And they worked in groups.
And tell us a little bit about the overall objectives for using podcasts. I know you want to improve proficiency in listening and speaking and things, so just go into that a little bit in depth.
So obviously the main goal of the class was to learn about Italian pop culture. And on top of that, I wanted them to basically increase their level in their skills of speaking and listening. I think they also did acquire a lot of vocabulary during the research, so that kind of like matches what the data that I had found before. Sure. But yeah, my main goal was to help them build confidence in what they were doing in speaking. And if you listen to the first episode and you listen to the last episode, I think you can hear a difference. Right. The first episode, we were all new to it. We knew what we wanted to do. We didn't know what was going to come out of that. And so after the second episode and third and fourth, then they knew what we were going to do and they were more prepared for it. But I also gave them self-evaluations to do. So every time an episode was ready and posted, I would ask them to listen to the whole thing, give themselves a grade, but also write down things that we did well as a group and things that we could improve in future episodes.
Sure. Great. Dr. Meyer, we'll come back to you. Are there any misconceptions or mistakes that newbies to podcasting, especially academics who might not be used to this medium, would make? Or do you have any words of advice for those people?
Yeah, I think so. Podcasting is easier than you think it is, and so much harder than you'd imagine it was from a pedagogical standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. And just to get through the easy part first, like we had that kit there, right? And that's like about $500 worth of equipment. You've got these microphones and cables everywhere. You're like, what do I do? But really, to make a podcast, grab your Notes app on your phone and your voice recorder. You can record into that. There's an open source software called Audacity, which is free and open source, like platform agnostic. You can be a Mac user, you can be a Windows user, and you can just record decent audio, throw it in there, mix it, you've got a podcast. Now you're cooking with fire. The harder part of it, though, from just like a professor's point of view or class structure, is finding ways to encourage confidence in your students, finding ways to encourage creativity and a little bit of getting into their own passions and personality, bringing that out. And I think, at like what I love about hearing you talk about your process in the class is how you thought about that. And, like teaching, we talk about scaffolding. Like every single lesson was a scaffold, right? So it's going through the history of the decade and the pop culture, then actually having them write out scripts. Then they're talking to each other way before they're doing the actual assignment, which is making the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And that is where the hard part comes in. It's easy to record. It's easy to make a podcast. It's harder to make an assignment that really creates meaningful learning outcomes that helps to cement learning and give confidence to students, right? And I think like this assignment is one of those assignments that is just beautifully done from start to finish in the sense of just creating that space for growing their language acquisition.
So most of the total experience is in the preparation. Yeah, it's our preparation. The podcast is the final product, but there are hours of preparation behind it as well as practice.
And one thing to add too on that is the openness to experiment and fail. Mm-hmm. Like knowing that day one is not going to sound as good as day four, and maybe day four isn't going to sound as good as day one, but letting students play and learn and grow, that's critical, because if they get something bad and you're like, well, everything was about how this sounds, they're going to hate the assignment moving forward. But if it's more like, I'm doing this too, we're learning together, let's grow, that creates a permission structure for learning that's hard to do in a lot of other assignments because it's pass or fail. This is show me what you know.
So I think it's one. And let me tell you, I mentioned how scared they were on day one when I said we're going to make a podcast, but I didn't mention how excited they were when Joseph showed up with the kid. And so opening up, and they start to realize we are actually going to make a podcast. They were really excited.
Well, so then now that after it was all over, you had your 4 podcasts and they had listened to all of it, they evaluated them. What was their final reaction?
Well, I think obviously I'm biased. and they buy that because they give me great feedback on the student evaluation at the end of the year. And one of the things that stood out on those evaluations was the podcast, right? They really enjoyed making the podcast. And it's something that is still there for them. You know, we host it on the IMLC YouTube page. And so it's still there for them to share with friends, with their family, to go back and maybe if they continue with Italian, you know, after Baylor, they can go back and listen to themselves. And you know, even learn I get from those episodes. But
Sure. So say for the audience one more time, where can they actually go and see podcast episodes?
So the YouTube account for the IMLC at Baylor is where we the website where it's hosted.
As IMLC is the Interactive Media and Language Center, which is a part of the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures. Great. That's wonderful. And have you been able to determine whether they actually benefited? Did their speaking improve and listening improve? Can you walk us through some of those results?
Yeah. So in my opinion, when I looked at the way I graded them, they definitely improved in their speaking skills. We didn't do as much listening skills, except for like listen to our podcast. I should have included more, I think, guided listening of episodes, but that was we have so much that we want to include in our classes. We have to choose what to do. Exactly. But so if I would do this again, I would probably change that. I would structure the listening to podcasts better. But they, in the surveys that they did at the end of the class, they definitely indicated that the way they graded their all skills much higher than they did at the beginning of the class.
That's great. That's wonderful. So you plan to continue using podcasting in different classes?
Yes. I'm just waiting for we have a rotation of courses every teach, and I'm just waiting for that course that makes sense to do a podcast with. But absolutely, especially now that we have an upgraded kid and you
We're coming close to the end of our time. So do either of you have some final comments or observations you can make?
Let me just say, on the topic of research, my last research that I did was when I wanted to do this and I didn't know how to put it into practice, was I just, quickly Googled Baylor podcasting. Let's see, if there's something that I can use. And Joseph's face popped up and it said on the page, Podcasting 101. Basically, we have the technology and we can teach you how to use it. And I cannot believe that I was looking at the page because that was exactly what I needed at that time. And it was just fate.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So we've come to the end of our time today. I want to thank our guests again, Dr. Eleonora Boscolo and Dr. Joseph Meyers, Manager of Creative Media for the Baylor Libraries. And if you have enjoyed this episode or other episodes of In Other Worlds, please consider making a donation to our Departmental Excellence Fund by clicking on the QR code that you will see on the screen. Contributions made to the Excellence Fund support faculty research and student experiences and enable Baylor to drive tuition costs down. Please join us next month for episode 9 of In Other Worlds.